Project Lawful aka Planecrash by Arwayne aka Eliezer Yudkowsky and Lintamande. Crisis of Faith, Episode 172.
Back. Sorry, it was just... The Carissa Sivar I thought I knew would have wanted something that I just did. The imaginary Carissa Sivar. I don't know about the real one, if she would have wanted that too, but it doesn't matter, does it? She wasn't the one I was in love with.
Do you want a hug? You look kind of like you want a hug, but it might just be the having recently been crying.
I am not sure that I should, Feyanar. I am not sure we should be hanging out together more. I like you, you see, and I am not sure that I should be making any more friends at this point. Osirian is maybe not an evil place, but it is not necessarily looking like a place where I can belong, and the story I'm in seems to be one where emotional relationships I develop just get torn away from me. When and if it turns out that I can get Carissa back, if it turns out I'm in that sort of story, I will consider the possibility of developing new emotional relationships. Until then, it is in my own interests not to be that sort of character anymore, the sort who has friends and interesting relationships. Not me threatening the tropes. See, just what makes sense for me to do in my own best interests, given the way the story has been going.
That sounds wildly unhealthy and ill-advised, but I'm not going to ignore you and hug you anyway, since that seems liable to cause an international incident of some kind.
Thanks. Dath Ilan is all about self-determination, see? In a world where people can't decide for themselves without hurting themselves, there's not very much left of what we are. He doesn't like this, doesn't like what it's increasingly obvious is the thing he is going to end up deciding to do from here, even if he hasn't decided it yet. All he can do, maybe, is speedrun the Osirian arc as much as he can and get past the unhappy part. I am not really understanding Osirian. I think, I suspect, speculate, that I was supposed to be here with Corva Talandria, that she was supposed to help me understand this, but I shit all over her character root by being stupid and thoughtless, and now this part is just fouled beyond repair.
That is a really concerning thing for you to be saying. I don't think it's a good way to make predictions, and I sort of think we should pay Iomede to talk to you again for longer or something.
I'd rather she didn't. I appreciate the first vision. It was very good for me, but I do not want anybody looking at my mind at this point. Not even gods. Not even gods who used to be human. I want my privacy back, and am seriously considering severing the cleric bond to Abadar, in case he gets the contents of my thoughts every morning at dawn. How serious of a decision is that? Is it hugely expensive for Abadar to cleric me again afterwards? Or is it much cheaper the second time?
I think it is very expensive to re-cleric someone who rejected. I'm not actually entirely sure it's even possible. Do you want me to just urgently ask him that? And can someone get Keltham a glass of water with a lemon in it?
I've got a commune. I can ask directly, but if you've got a commune anyways and have a spare binary question begging, then sure, go ahead and ask. I mean, people did claim to me that Abadar cannot easily read my mind, especially about non-Abadaran things, which helps, and maybe Abadar is not a sort of thing who'd use info he read against me. But having to constantly think about which of your thoughts might be read out and used against you is something I'd like to leave behind in Cheliax, if at all possible. I only did that for one day at the end of it all, didn't suspect before then that they were reading my mind, but it was very tiring doing that. It's a high cost to put on cleric powers, and the main thing keeping me a cleric is that it gives me a stronger will save against mortals running detect thoughts on me.
Abadar's definitely not a sort of thing who'd use info he read against you. He takes the water off one of the guards. Did you hear all that? Put the question to the Pharaoh. Yes, Your Royal. I think you might be underestimating what you would lose if you broke with Abadar, even if you meant nothing about your intent to trade with him, even if to you it's just a set of magic benefits. people would not have answered those questions from a random person. They know the church, they know its priests are fair and say what they mean and desire mutual benefit, and where they're strange pursuing axis.
There's the question of whether that trust is deserved, if I'm going to be a horrible foreigner coming in from outside and wrecking things.
Well, I think it is. You weren't coming in to wreck things. You were coming in to try to understand them. And most people are stupid and can't explain themselves, and you can still trade fairly with them. That's the whole thing, right?
I am not pursuing Axis, Feyanar. It's not unlikely that I'm going to get an atonement to neutral evil at some point soon, to make sure I have a way out of this reality at any time, if it turns out I don't want to live here, and I do not want people becoming friends with me, and then feeling hurt about that, and being a tie that keeps me here even if I don't want to be here.
That surpasses the previous thing you said for concerningness. But I don't think that's because I'm your friend. I think it's because you're skipping steps all over the place in a way that really worries me. Are you under the impression people in Axis can't stop existing if they want to? Why would Axis work that way?
Hell works that way, and I wasn't under the impression that any of these afterlives were designed by things that cared about human beings the way that human beings cared about themselves or each other. But if people in Axis are allowed to leave reality, then that does change things. Yes, I'll have to decide if it changes things enough. The people here are caring and friendly, and Keltham is trying to make them stop trying to be friendly, trading partners with him, but it is not especially surprising that they are being slow to accept that. Dathilani would be slow to accept that too, if they didn't recognize what Keltham was doing and why. I should go finish up this set of conversations, because I find that I want to visit the all-seeing eye and see somebody who, it's too late, for me to not be friends with, and ask her whether we, outside of the conspiracy, have the sort of relationship where I'm allowed to cry in front of her.
Okay. People in Axis can destroy themselves if they want to, because Axis doesn't lay claim to them, because we're actually very different from Hell, which is the horrible evil dimension run by the evil god. People in the good afterlives can also destroy themselves if they want to. It's true that Abaddon has a survival rate that's close enough to 0, but the fact daemons will eat your soul does not mean they'll do it quickly or in a manner you would like. If you decide to give up on existing, please go to a non-evil afterlife about it. Also, please drink the water. Sometimes people think they're having one problem when actually the problem they're having is that they aren't drinking enough water for Sodus in midday.
He'll drink the water. Dathilani don't just ignore advice about self-care like that. And back to interview his remaining interview subjects.
The women of Osirian have suggestions for how the lot of women could be improved. The gambling should be banned, that women, but not men, should be allowed to divorce, and that women should be allowed to marry without their father's approval if they could convince a court their father was being unreasonable. They have complaints about their lives. Janna's mother-in-law barely gives Janna money for clothes and saves her the worst portions of food. Janna thinks it's because she's a jealous old hag. Hanifa's husband keeps investing in business ventures he says will pay off one day but have shown no signs of that so far. She's still pleased she married him because he's very cosmopolitan and hardly demands anything of her, but she's worried they'll be ruined in their old age. Zainab's first husband was lost at sea and second husband died last year of old age. She's too old to marry again, she says, and wouldn't want to anyway, though she is lonely sometimes. She did petition for and get granted acknowledgement as the head of her second husband's household, since her only sons were by her first husband. It wasn't very complicated. She told a priest she knew how to do figuring, and had a good reputation with their neighbours, and never missed church, and had deposited savings 40 of the last 50 weeks, and she didn't think there was anyone better for the family until the little children grew up, and he gave her a paper for it. Janna thinks that men should be told in church to want sex less often, as it's burdensome for their wives. Lamia thinks that the schools should feed boys, otherwise she can't afford to send them. All of them think that if Osirian were richer then things would be better. None of them have problems they'd still have if they were rich, as they see it. Zainab argues, in response to hypotheticals about neutral gender laws, that if Cheliax kills half of all Osirian's men, the country will bounce right back in a generation. But if it kills half of all Osirian's women, that can't really be recovered from. and so a country that sent women off to war will gradually be conquered by places that didn't.
Keltham will offer up galaxy-brained ideas. They don't have that idiom. Sorry, over-clever ideas. Including that, any woman should be allowed to legally get declared to be a man if a panel of 3 judges looking only at written answers can't tell the difference between her answers and the answers of 3 actual men, to a set of questions intended to probe whatever capabilities or personality characteristics men supposedly have that women don't. Setting up villages composed entirely of women, where women can go as refugees if they want to be outside the system. Maybe doing some sort of factory work if farming requires strength that's too high. Having there be a kind of face-concealing robes people can wear, and then it's illegal to ask or check whether anybody under the face-concealing robe is a man or a woman, in case some men would also like to resign from this gender system. Running the second circle area effect spell. Detect thoughts all over the place. So everybody with intelligence at least 14 can get wizard lessons at least up to prestidigitation.
Any woman should be allowed to legally get declared to be a man if a panel of 3 judges looking only at written answers can't tell the difference between her answers and the answers of 3 actual men to a set of questions intended to probe whatever capabilities or personality characteristics men supposedly have that women don't. And then she cuts out her womb. Like, being like a man psychologically doesn't make her a man. If you fed a man a sex change potion, then he'd be a woman, despite having all the male traits he had before. Setting up villages composed entirely of women, where women can go as refugees if they want to be outside the system, maybe doing some sort of factory work if farming requires a strength. That's too high. That sounds neat, actually. Some women would really like that, ones who don't want to marry or are terrified of childbearing or whatever. It'd be expensive to set up, but maybe self-sustaining once it was set up. The Church of Sarenrae might agree to administer it, having there be a kind of face-concealing robes people can wear, and then it's illegal to ask or check whether anybody under the face-concealing robes is a man or a woman, in case some men would also like to resign from this gender system. Seems like it would be used by assassins and convicts on the run, and so on. Running the second circle area effect spell, detect thoughts all over the place, so everybody with intelligence, at least 14, can get wizard lessons at least up to prestidigitation. People mostly know who their bright children are. The problem is that they can't afford to train them to be wizards, or that it's more straightforward to train them in some other trade where clever people can prosper, or that they're needed in the family business. If wizard training was much cheaper, that might be good, but knowing which children are officially clever wouldn't help really. Also, isn't that illegal because of how it's a mind-reading spell? It's kind of like invisibly spying on women in the bath.
Also, isn't that illegal? Because of how it's a mind-reading spell? It's kind of like invisibly spying on women in the bath. Tap the wizard with a truth spell afterwards to check if they crossed over into reading minds instead of detecting intelligence. Seems like it would be used by assassins and convicts on the run and so on. Could require some sort of recognizable, individualized outer mask, so long as it didn't reveal sex, and then somebody with an unfamiliar mask could raise as many alarm bells as an unfamiliar face. That sounds neat, actually. Some women would really like that, ones who don't want to marry or are terrified of childbearing or whatever. It'd be expensive to set up, but maybe self-sustaining once it was set up. The Church of Sarenrae might agree to administer it. Osirian's probably going to get some new factories soon. Keltham will push this, if it's what the women of Osirian actually want of him. And Osirian. And think is worth trying.
Yeah, they all know someone who'd probably go for that if it existed. And it reduces the marriage competition for everyone else.
And when he's done in the courtyard, he'll just pay over a gold piece to everyone there, that he hasn't paid already, since they were also speaking, and a further gold to the oldest woman. It's not the good, effectively altruistic thing to do, but money in that quantity is meaningless to him now, and he may as well use it any time it cheers himself up at least a little, to make people happier for having traded with him. Besides, it's not impossible that people in this world are being run with more reality fluid when they're in his presence, and it's maybe an altruistically well-leveraged use of money to make their lives relatively happier while he's in the middle of passing through them.
Well, he'll certainly make them very happy, and also very confused.
any significantly different ideas from the women not in the courtyard, who were vending rather than spinning.
They seem a bit wealthier, on average, but that doesn't change too much. It means they worry less about feeding their children and more about jealous relatives. One woman says she does the accounting because her husband doesn't have any head for numbers and gives him spending money. Another says, cheerfully, that she slips a bit of the stand proceeds aside for herself and her marriage is happier for it. And don't tell me I'll lose access about it. I've got 4 kids in the boneyard, and don't mind if I do have to spend a while trying to find them.
Keltham briefly considers asking at what age children start showing up in the boneyard, decides against it. It's not going to be the decisive question about anything. If there'd be a decisive question of that kind, it would be the age at which children start showing up in hell. And Keltham would rather not learn that right here and now, in case subsequent thoughts shatter his connection to Abadar immediately, while he's outside and his security team is not prepared for that, and he'll start heading to the temple of the all-seeing eye. Feanar, continuing from an earlier conversation, the thought occurred to me, after that killing myself is supposedly evil and then I end up in hell. That's why people go on being slaves, that they can't kill themselves without going to an evil afterlife. That's how Pharasma locked the little tiny helpless things she didn't care about into having to endure what she puts them through. In which case, I'm back to wanting an atonement to neutral evil, so I have a way out of this.
Murder is evil, but self-murder isn't very evil. You could donate 1,000 GP to an orphanage or something, and you'd be more than clear. The problem is, just for people who haven't done much of anything impactful with their lives, and so killing themselves is one of the only things they're judged by. And obviously, if you want to die, we can handle that in some way. That isn't you killing yourself. I think you should wait a couple of weeks before making major decisions about being a priest of Abadar or becoming neutral evil or killing yourself.
Not necessarily an option I have, based on what I've read about how clerics work. If my psychology drifts too far away from believing my purpose aligned to Abadar's, the bond just breaks whether I like it or not, as I understand it, and I'm not sure that it lasts past my next serious library visit at this rate. But I can wait a couple of weeks on the atonement, sure, if that's even something I want to do. To be clear, I am not failing to hear the part where you can supposedly buy a safe suicide for 1,000 GP, though I'd worry about reliability. And I'm obviously not going to kill myself until I've repaid my debt to Abadar, which, even with a ring of sustenance and spamming lesser restorations and a Splendor headband, is going to take more than a couple of weeks. There were things much worse than death that could have happened to me, and I acknowledge in full the debt I owe to Abadar for that.
This seems like a social emergency nonetheless. I hate that kind. I don't suppose I can convince you to talk to anyone who doesn't hate that kind?
Planning to talk to Ione Sala, who I thought was our Nethesian safety officer and dating me, and was actually Oracle of Nethys.
Great. Please do proceed with that. Why would anyone ever have a Nethesian safety officer?
Asmodeans is what Ione would have said, but I don't know now. What was real? I'll ask her, I guess.
The Temple of the All-Seeing Eye is an enormous building that appears to be made out of glittering rainbow glass and crystal, radiating magic, twisting upwards into a spire that is, just by a few inches, taller than the Black Dome. It looked different last week. It's surrounded by taverns hawking Nefredi Klapati's wine. They serve some essential function as a transitional zone between it and the rest of Sothis. Without them, it'd feel pasted in from another world entirely.
Okay, I'm starting to appreciate Nethys, Nefredi Klapati, or whoever actually is responsible for this. That is one solar punk-ass office building to find on a planet with this tech level. Solar punk. I'd try to define it, but I'm not sure I can do a better job than just pointing at this office building.
Oh, Nefreti's all right. Gives my son endless indigestion, but it's good for him. Did you know she's blown up the whole place to smithereens 5 different times? One time, she killed 20 people, and Nethys gave her 2 more cleric circles for it. What's the dialogue tag for apocryphal, possibly exaggerated?
baseline doesn't have a single word translation for apocryphal. You don't really get apocrypha the way Galarian does when you're a high-functioning civilization with centralized repositories of data and arguments that anybody on the planet can access within a minute or so if they're not currently in the shower or something. I can say it the way you'd say if you were talking about a popular but rather doubtful fan theory of a trendy fiction. Keltham will talk about this dispute over Galarian reality, using the tones that Dathalani would use to talk about a dispute over fiction.
The interior of the temple is mostly hollow, with stairs ringing it, climbing up and up and up to the highest levels of the spire. On the ground level, on the glossy marble ground, a hive of teenagers are working on an enormous sand art rendering of the words, "It is heresy unto Nethys to claim that anything could not or will not explode." They are placing the grains of sand entirely with mage hands from a distance of 15 feet, and occasionally hissing at each other when their work collides with one another. More of them are boys than girls, but there are some of both. One, hovering in mid-air to correct someone else's sand art error, is a girl who has solved the modesty problems intrinsic to mid-air hovering by making her skirt 20 feet long and tying it to a nearby railing.
It stabs at his heart, again. Is this subplot about how it's going to seem at first like this place is his new home, not Osirian, that this is the fragment of Dathilan, the temple of the all-seeing eye? And then he's going to look into it, and it's going to be horribly wrong somehow, and maybe this is how he loses Ione too. Keltham shall prestidigitate the air, into diffraction-sheened fragile shards then, and send them wafting over to cling to the sand art while they last, outlining the words in strange rainbows that change color depending on the angle you look at them. He also moves his sparkles from 30 feet with mage hand, because competitiveness. He has that wizard cantrip hung for now, though he'll need to swap it out for detect magic if he stops being a cleric, and give up resistance and guidance, because prestidigitation and message and detect magic and dancing lights are none of them spells he can afford to give up.
At first they object to someone messing with their very important project, and then they recognize the rainbow pattern, because Ione has told them the story of the Chelish agent in Absalom with the inimitable cloak, and swing around to see who did it. And that sure is a foreign boy of some unidentifiable racial category strangely dressed.
"Are you the Keltham? The boldest of them, which is the flying girl asks?"
Yes, unless the conspiracy goes far deeper than I thought. You happen to know where I could find my Nethesian safety officer? He doesn't pause in creating the diffraction shards from nothingness.
"Ione, she's in the library," they chorus in unison.
So where's the library from here? But also, what's Ione been up to? How's she doing here? And is Osirian trying to give her any shit over her being female?
"Left door. She's been reading a lot. She takes it well when we prank her."
Everyone comes out of Cheliax a little fucked up.
"Nefredi Klapati is female."
What even is Osirian, really? I don't think it can talk.
"I'm not sure she's left the temple."
Isn't she one of those place-cursed oracles who can't?
Diana told her that I'm actually Nocticula, and she was just like, yeah, I expected her to show up at some point.
And are you, in fact, Nocticula? Keltham will ask, casting detect magic and peering closely at this person.
She does have disguise self up. "What? No, I'm Shoré. I'm studying to be an illusionist. I just use disguise self to cover my acne."
Sounds like what Nocticula would say.
"What? That's not at all what Nocticula would say."
Well, what would Nocticula say then, since you apparently know so much about that?
Probably something sexy.
"Keltham," says another girl behind him breathily. "I hunger for your touch."
Yeah, like that.
"No man has ever satisfied me. But there's something to you. Something I've never felt before."
See, that is not very persuasive. Which is very convincing about you not being Nocticula, who should be much more persuasive. Just the kind of convincingness that would be expected from somebody secretly with Splendor 30. Anyways, is one of you Donna? That'd be the most obvious candidate for the one to actually be Nocticula.
The girl who just declared that no man had ever satisfied her waves. "Hi, Keltham. I'm Dana. I will not confirm or deny being Nocticula."
Well, Nefredi Klapati presumably knows all about you, since her power basically appears to be spoilers, and would presumably have a good reason for letting you stay here. So, I'll let it pass. Nefredi Klapati drop any other spoilers I should know about, by the by.
She told Ione a bunch of stuff, but Ione mostly didn't tell the whole temple.
You can talk to her yourself if you want. She takes appointments.
Figure I'll talk to Ione first, and see whether the plot calls for me to meet Klapati right now. She seems like the kind of character who shows up very infrequently, and only at crisis points.
This gets some raised eyebrows from among the students, but no one comments.
Does Klapati, not do the thing at you where she obviously knows the plot?
She knows everything, but there's not just one plot.
In what sense?
There are lots of things happening, and lots of them matter, and lots of them could be called a plot.
Are there, another 15 of me, all of whose stories are going to collide with mine during the next story arc?
A shrug. Sounds like a good question to ask Nefredi, but I didn't mean that there were more of you specifically, just that there are many plots that have nothing to do with you. Like sometimes Nefredi will say things about the rise of the...
Don't, says Dana. In his current mood, he'll take it as a plot hook for whatever the fuck he's doing.
But my whole point was that it's...
I know, but if you say it in front of him, he'll decide that it's part of his story. I went through a phase like that too.
You were a protagonist before you became Nocticula?
If I became Nocticula, then I sure bet I was a protagonist before that.
Not a very successful one, unless this world was a lot more of a wreck before you showed up. I suppose I have no right to say it. Haven't exactly been much more successful myself. But if there have been failed protagonists before me, then that's not a great sign. Well, it wouldn't be if they were actual protagonists and not just in-story former protagonists.
I don't know why you're imagining Nocticula doesn't like the world fine.
Fair enough. Hope you're not Nocticula then, or that you're misdirecting about what Nocticula is okay with. She seems like a nice person, and it would be correspondingly non-nice, though obviously very much in keeping with the plotline so far, if Keltham had to destroy her too.
No one is quite sure what to say to that. Not that that stops them. Is it true that Aspexia Rugaton pretended to be Nefredi?
And you figured it out by asking her to prove she was omniscient, but she's not, because she's just a follower of the loser god Asmodeus.
Is it true that Carissa Sevar pretended to be the entire Church of Abadar, while also telling Aspexia Rugaton the setup to pretend to be Nefredi, while also solving the hardest math problems you could think of, while also wearing the crown of infernal majesty, while also almost collapsing from internal conflict about whether to betray Cheliax for you?
Yes, Aspexia did. Yes, that's how I figured it out. Yes, Carissa pretended to be a seventh circle priest of Abadar, though it was her own version of the theology. I don't know. Ione left quickly. About whether Carissa was telling Aspexia how to pretend to be Nefreti, I gave Carissa a math problem that was hard but I thought solvable for her. I didn't ask her to prove that every even number is the sum of two primes. Carissa said that the queen lent her the crown, but I don't know myself if she spoke truth then. Where did you hear about the internal conflict thing? Did Ione say that? Or Klapati?
Oh, I just kind of heard it at breakfast.
I heard it from Elodie, who said she heard it from Odette.
I heard it in the tavern this afternoon. I figured someone had gotten drunk last night and repeated the whole story.
Oh, that was me, only I don't remember what I said.
I think I am going to go ask Ione whether that was a spoiler leak or not. Right now. Excuse me. To the library door.
It's a beautiful library. It's 8 stories tall, and you mostly can't navigate it if you're incapable of flight. But some effort was made at some point to put the books that'd get you to third circle within reach of the ground. And also there are some only slightly defective magic carpets heaped over the backs of chairs for use as needed. There are desks of every size, from 4 5-year-olds and/or gnomes up through 4 dragons. One with an actual dragon sitting at it, in dragon form, reading.
Oh, wow. You a dragon? A girlfriend of mine once got temporarily turned into one of those and was forced to hide it from me as part of an enormous conspiracy. Never actually seen one before outside of books. Actually, there's a lot of things I've never seen outside of books.
The dragon blinks enormous golden eyes at him. Yes, idiot, I'm a dragon. If you don't mind, I'm working. If you do mind, I'm still working.
Sorry for bothering you. He'll look around for somebody who looks more botherable and ask them how to find Ione.
Someone's waving at this dragon-bothering idiot from behind a library desk, one with quite a few books stacked.
Well, he'll go over and look at her then. Hi, I'm Keltham, You apparently may have heard of me. Know where I'd find Ione?
If you haven't already found her, she's probably not here today.
Okay, I can recognize the voice even with the changed hair and changed clothes and... Hi, Keltham says, from behind the hands that are now covering his face.
She'll take him by the arm then, and shelve the two of them directly into her private bedroom nook, and then make there be hush in the library.
He notices obviously when he's teleported, and opens his eyes, even as the suddenly distant sounds of the library quiet entirely.
The library is not generally set up for cursed oracles who need to live in it, but it is set up for researchers who keep odd hours. This nook is in a corner full of dusty old books on the Kellish Empire in the 13th century, and it has a plump mattress on a low table and an ever-burning light beside it, and a dresser, and a mirror over the dresser that's angled to reflect the distant library ceiling, where a wizard can dimly be seen flitting around.
That's new, or is it? His voice cracks some.
It's new. I found out how oracles level, and, it turns out, starting a god war by prophesying it is worth a fair number of oracle circles once cashed in, though it still works only inside the library I'm in, at this level.
Do we, in fact, have the sort of relationship where you hold me while I cry? Please, please, don't lie to me about that.
No more lies. Ever again. And yes, we do.
This may take a while.
Nefreti, was that supposed to happen?
In what sense can anything be said to be supposed to happen, really? But I do think the boy needs a hug.
And he's getting a hug.
Oh, I imagine so.
And not getting horribly further traumatized, so that now he'll do something even stupider than going to Abaddon to be eaten as an act of protest.
Imagine being the kind of person who, when horribly traumatized, would do something even stupider than going to Abaddon to be eaten.
You win. I have no idea what you mean. Do you know some languages spoken only on obscure distant planes you could teach me?
I do, and some of them would be really funny, but I'm actually busy right now. Tell your son I said hi.
Which one?
Oh, come on, which one will make a funny face when you say it? And she vanishes.
Keltham has by now had thoughts like, is this the real Ione? But he did still, after all of that, which he'd been through, still have his glimpse of truth that he never did use while piercing the conspiracy, which Keltham has now spent to confirm this for the real Ione. Though Klapati could probably fake past true seeing, by all accounts, but, at that point, it becomes a matter of Keltham becoming tired of unsolvable plot lines like that, and his emotions being crushed like that, and walking out on this reality. Hi, how have you been? Is Osirian going to give you any shit about being alone in a room with a man?
So, stop me if you don't want to hear about what an awesome time I'm having, but I am having a fucking incredible time, Keltham. I have a library full of amazing books, and everybody in the temple thinks I'm cool, and my problems are now along the lines of, oh no, the deranged possible doctrines of Nethys. I wrote up are spreading, and they have my name on them, and that's what people think of me. And not, being horribly tortured to death if I make a mistake. And I go to bed, and I'm not in Cheliax, and I wake up, and I'm again not in Cheliax, and I can go out and walk around in Sothis and have people look at me funny and still not be in Cheliax. I have achieved the greatest possible goal of any mortal being, to not be in Cheliax. I have maxed out my utility function, Keltham. This is literally as good as anything gets.
I notice you're not answering the alone in a room thing.
It's possible that somebody will think worse of me for being alone in a room with you, despite it being fairly obvious to anyone who knows about Cheliax that I've already had a lot of sex, all of which you'd consider to be rape, and am as ruined as any woman can possibly get. But it doesn't matter what they think of me, because none of them have the authority to gouge my eyes out or set me on fire. So who fucking cares what they think?
Sounds like you also came out of this with some issues then.
None of my issues are being in Cheliax, so they aren't important.
Are the others, left behind in Cheliax, going to be okay for at least a while?
I'm sorry, Keltham. I really am. But I can't tell you anything that you haven't already figured out about that.
You're spoiler protected.
In the sense that I can't help you, steer you, yeah. Keltham, you can. At least talk with me about whatever parts you do figure out after you figure them out, so long as you're just trying to talk with somebody about them or cry about them, and not use me as an oracle to confirm things you're still not sure about.
And now I don't know if I can trust you about that.
Nefredi did basically read me in on what was actually going on. It's safe to talk in front of me. You can truth spell me about that part, if need be, and my oaths still matter to me even if I've been atoned to not lawful.
True neutral?
To start with, I'm helping Osirian against Cheliax for reasons that include my actually wanting people not to suffer, and not just Osirian paying me tons of money and my incredible searing hatred of Asmodeus. Might start detecting neutral good any day now.
I'll have your oath then, if you're offering it. Truth spells seem like they'd just be meaningless against anybody who wants to fool them.
You know by now, right, that an oath doesn't send me to Abaddon if I break it? It's just me. Trust. Things like that mattering.
I've been told. Seem to matter to some people anyways, at least.
I, Ione Sala, Oracle of Nethys, of the Library's curse, do swear to you, Keltham, by Nethys and by our friendship, that Nefredi Klapati read me in on what she told me was the meaning of all of this. Enough that you could have somebody to talk to about the parts you figured out. Though that is, itself, something I've been told, and not something that I know.
I can't say it, I'm sorry. If you don't, tell me yourself. Show me that you know, then I don't dare say it. There's too much at stake.
And I don't know, without asking Nefredi, if she'd even tell me how much you've figured out by today. So I can't go telling you things myself either. Though you're not running your glibness pin, which, on my writ of you, you're not sure of anything yet.
I wasn't trying to use you as an oracle, Ione. It's just, there are things I'm trying not to think through. Not here, not right now, not yet.
I'll still be here after you have.
Noted.
On a more fun note, I used my Osirian money to buy a teleport scroll so I could plane shift all over the planes, or at least the ones worth visiting, and then teleport back to my library once I returned to Galarion. And then Nefredi told me I was going to get myself in trouble, and she'd have to gate me back, and she only told me that after I bought the teleport scroll. And it was very annoying, but not as annoying as being in Cheliax.
Outside the Temple of the All-Seeing Eye in Sotis, a group of men pushing a fruit cart stop because the cart has broken down. One of them climbs under the cart to try to realign the broken axle. The other two give him advice. They picked this approach rather than invisibility because there's no question that the target, and his escort, will have true seeing up. But here there's nothing to see. Just 3 men dressed for the hot Sotis weather and a cart full of melons. Their Osirian isn't even accented.
The person exiting this temple looks rather worn, but not as worn, perhaps, as he was reported to be going in.
One man fireballs the fruit cart. It turns out that inside these melons were, rather than fruit, some kind of alchemical bombs. There's a deafening roar that stuns everyone for 50 feet around except the 3 men, who, it happens, rendered themselves deaf in advance. The second man casts slow on the target and his escort. The third flings himself at the target, grabs him, and plane shifts with him.
Will save failed.
Then they'll land in an opulently decorated private demiplane with a vaulted ceiling through which golden light is streaming. Only the man who grabbed Keltham came along. The others were to try to teleport out themselves. "I apologize for the inconvenience," the man says. "Our only desire is for an opportunity to speak with you and learn more about you, and unfortunately this was the only way to enable that."
And who the hell would you be then?
We represent the Padisha Emperor Kalish the 22nd, the ruler of Kazmaran from Kadira to Zelshabar, an empire much larger than any in Avestan or Garund. The Emperor would like to speak to you of how you and he could benefit each other.
He's more surprised, shaken than he thought he would be, at a prospect he thought he was ready for. He'd been told the chances were against this actually happening to him, but his means of suicide are about him. He need only find out as much as he can, about what they know, about what they ask and what they want, before he uses it. He'll report one last time back to Osirian, from Axis, and then be reunited with his recently sundered wife, having died in the sort of cause that doesn't get you dinged for evil. He really did think he'd be readier than this. Back in the temple, the real Keltham is asking Ione now about what Project Lawful was actually like from the inside. What she knew before Nefredi's intervention, without spoilers, if that's something Ione can say. If Ione had any idea herself, before Nefredi, about how much of the Carissa that Keltham loved was real. If she would have actually cared about paying an int 14 Osirian woman's tuition to the Temple of Nethys, or setting up factory sanctuaries for women who want to earn their way out of the country.
That's something Ione is permitted to tell him. She hasn't known the truth for long. It's not hard to remember how everything looked to Ione of 2 days ago, to pretend to be that Ione in her own mind, and speak what that Ione would have said. It's not a lie if she tells Keltham that's what she's doing. So that Ione tells him everything, starting from being a wizard student in Ostenso, taken on very short notice to a seduction mission. Ione has not, in fact, been briefed on everything. Keltham's already been told by the others just before he left Cheliax. There's a transcript, but Ione hasn't seen it, and Keltham has held off on reviewing it. Neither of Ione knows that Keltham has already heard a version of this story from Asmodia. There's new info anyways. Ione's story is longer, told in private and under less time pressure. She tells Keltham about how they were forced to sell their souls, probably explicitly in the wake of Ione being oracled, when they realized that might happen to others. That was the first time Carissa failed to sell her soul. Yeah, she failed to sell her soul the second time too, though the devil who said it wasn't allowed right then tried to lock in a price of 3 wishes for later.
They faked the soul sale.
Yes, I think by having her do a permanency detect magic.
So Carissa would, in fact, be a hidden cleric then.
Wait, what? How does Keltham know that from... Ione keeps a neutral expression, of course. Spoilers? Can't say anything one way or the other about anything I didn't know 2 days ago.
How many of my other trope-based predictions have been coming true and being hidden from me?
I haven't knowingly run into Nocticula. Asmodia is a true asexual, and was the one who stands back and watches it all, in the sense that she was the conspiracy's law checker, consistency checker. She had a giant wall with green, yellow, red, purple, and black, writing for all the anomalies and inconsistencies in the fake universe they were constructing, and was sort of insane about it. As of 2 days ago, Ione says that she doesn't know what Asmodia's superpowers were, but Asmodia seemed to come back suspiciously healthier and less afraid after getting rezzed, which, contra to Sevar, is not usually what happens when somebody goes to hell. Sevar dropped hints about Project Lawful Girls having an easier time in hell, but claimed to not know anything herself, and pointed some fingers at Asmodia, who claimed to not know what Sevar was talking about. I definitely noticed a trend of all the trope girls having some reason to not be scared of hell the way everybody else was, but as of 2 days ago, I didn't get any visible success on my prediction that Yaisa would get touched by a god and end up with some reason of her own. Ione of 2 days ago knows a bunch of your trope-based predictions came true while you were fighting with the queen over Sevar, but they didn't tell that Ione any of the details. Presumably because the queen lost humiliatingly to you.
I didn't fight Abigail at any point that I know about. From my in-universe character viewpoint, after Azidra said there might be a problem, we had one very rational and sane conversation and resolved everything peacefully in order to deliberately avert all the tropes that I thought could have been invoked. Wait, no. That entire conversation with Isidra made absolutely no sense in terms of conspiracy, of real Cheliax. Ione, what the ass?
Ione of 2 days ago says she doesn't know what the ass? Sorry. She expresses that the real story is probably fucking awesome, if you could figure it out, and a glorious humiliation of Abigail Thrune that ought to get printed in every newspaper on the planet outside of Cheliax.
You sure that's not any spoiler leakage?
I have a lot of practice with not letting spoilers, info my character shouldn't know, leak to Keltham, unfortunately.
Yeah, fair. Peranza.
Ione of 2 days ago was told that Peranza had some mysterious, unspecified mental breakdown as a result of being taught dangerous techniques, did something inexplicable with her mind that an incompetent security allowed her to go on doing for 2 rounds before setting her to sleep. Gorthiclek got called in. Gorthiclek is a pit fiend. Plausibly, the literal, actual scariest and most powerful entity in Cheliax, ahead of both Abergel Thrune and Aspexia Rugaton. And then Peranza got turned into a statue pending there being real Chelilani to take care of her. She's not going to say anything about Sever torturing the security, exhibiting him to Project Lawful. It just seems like that would be cruel.
Snack Service said not to make any decisions about Peranza-related issues, pending knowledge of a fact that only one person there knew. No, knew enough to deduce.
Super not saying anything about anything Snack Service related. You shouldn't think too hard about it yourself, if you can help it.
I figured. You want to just tell the whole story in something like a reasonable order.
She will. It's a story that makes entire sense to her. Now, if not to him. She has a lot of practice in not letting any of that show.
Keltham has additional questions.
She has all the answers, and can't speak most of them.
Keltham asks Ione about her real life, before Project Lawful, if there's anything there that seems psychologically safe to say. Keltham is not really trying to get additional horrors piled onto him. Right now, he expects to get enough horror during his next library expeditions. He just was wondering about the real Ione.
It is probably better that he not be told most of it. She does tell him the story of how she found a sick bird she wanted to nurse back to health, and how her older brother found the bird and slowly tore it to bits, living, while Ione watched, and how that was the last time Ione let herself care about anything, because she understood that anything she let herself care about would be used as a weapon to hurt her.
Oh, she does understand then.
Yes.
The romantic plotline is supposed to have Ione say, last time she let herself care about anything, until she met Keltham.
Ione was not, in fact, permitting herself to care too much about Keltham until she, and he, were both out of Cheliax. And she cannot comment about whether or not her current state of knowledge would let her care more about Keltham, because of all the possible worlds where it would be a spoiler that she could or couldn't.
Moot point. He's not advancing any relationships right now. Ione supposedly already knows why not.
Keltham, if you're trying not to think this through too much right now, you probably shouldn't be talking about it.
Nah. You can talk without thinking, and if I didn't know what I was doing on some level, I wouldn't be able to do it. Though that does make it hard to decide what not to say.
Doesn't talking about it automatically cause your brain to reflect on it?
Not if I decide it doesn't.
Add that to the list of Alani skills that Golarion, for now, will be better off without.
Keltham emerges from Ione's bedroom eventually, looking a little less shell-shocked than when he went in. Knowing that his Carissa was, so far as Ione of 2 days ago knows, almost real, helps and hurts at the same time. His decisions would have been easier, past this point, if Carissa had in fact sold her soul, if the contract with Keltham had been fake, if Carissa had been headed to hell no matter what, on the default course of things.
If you wish to support this AI reading and others like it, please visit patreon.com/AskWhoCastsAI. Any help is appreciated. And thank you to executive producer John Doe 7776059.